Hello and welcome to the universe of SAP Business Technology Platform in a nutshell. Today's session will focus on the world of proCode-based development with SAP BTP. And with this, I would like to hand over to Toros.
Thank you, Tanya. Welcome, everyone. My name is Toros Legend. Thank you so much for joining us in our episode 8 of our SAP BTP SAP Business Technology Platform in a nutshell. We have a great agenda for you today. Today's session will be proCode development with SAP BTP. Because there's so much content in today's session, I will forego the rest of my slides with regards to some of the intro that I usually do. Also, we're going to not have a formal Q&A, but rather we'll be collecting all of your questions at the end of this session, and our two speakers, Tim and Safa, will answer those, and we will upload the chat at the end of the session. So please do keep your questions coming, and we will answer your questions as quickly as possible. Today's session, we'll have Dr. Safa Golroch-Bahush, Senior Product Specialist, covering ABAP-based extensibility options, overview, and use cases, and then my colleague Tim Back, Chief Development Architect for SAP BTP, SAP at SE, will cover application development with proCode development. Without further ado, I'd like to hand it over to Safa. Safa?
Thank you, Toros. So let me share my screen. Okay, do you see my screen?
Yes.
So as it's already said, I'm going to talk about the ABAP-based extensibility options we have in ABAP platform. I give you some overview and also use cases. So let's start. So this is our disclaimer as usual. So first, let's take a look on the available options in the area of extensibility as of today to differentiate all the extensibility options we have. Here on the left below, you can see the classic extension that you can do in the ABAP development area. You can develop freestyle there, you can expand the existing code or modify and so on. Of course, this option is limited to the on-premise variant of S/4HANA. In the cloud, you have access to the yellow area here, namely the so-called in-app extensibility, or often called key user extensibility. This is a set of Fiori applications in the S/4HANA system that can be accessed via the S/4HANA Launchpad, which give you access to simpler extensions in the S/4HANA system. And accordingly, we have different target groups there than for classical ABAP development within the system. And then have the cloud perspective on the right-hand side in the Business Technology Platform, with which you can separate custom code from the S/4HANA system. As said, the classic custom ABAP code extension is no longer available in the cloud. So if you want to do real development, it can be done side by side on SAP up to now, actually. This development are really separated from SAP code. That means on your business stack, you have SAP Cloud Platform, and there you can do development projects, and you can call APIs from dedicated business system. But with the new release, then we have the on-stack development possibility known as developer extensibility. Of course, classical extensibility is also kind of a developer extensibility, but we call it that way because in S4 Cloud, we didn't have an actual development space until recently. So we name it this way to differentiate between these two. But we will talk about it later in much more detail, so the difference will be more clear. So let's take a look on the side-by-side extensibility. So first, the values we have on SAP BTP ABAP environment. We offer ABAP environment in Business Technology Platform for the ABAP developers on the market to make use of different advantages and assets we already have. So SAP BTP ABAP environment enables the ABAP developer community to step into the cloud. The first aspect we need to consider is about transforming the existing know-how you have from on-premise development and transform it to be useful in the cloud. This also counts for ABAP assets which means the custom code or the partner case, in the partner case, the existing partner add-ons in on-premise, and make it possible to reuse this kind of code and bring it to the cloud and run it in BTP as a cloud environment. But how such modern development environment is managed? In the case of BTP, if you use ABAP, the whole platform is managed by SAP, which makes it platform as a service. This means you don't have to take care of any underlying lifecycle management or operation. For example, if you're used to the classical upgrades and patches on the on-premise environment, that would not have to be done by you in the cloud anymore, because these environments are managed by SAP equally for all customers and partners. And you can be sure that you always work with the new standards, which is fundamentally different from the on-premise world, where you have to take care of the whole lifecycle management of the underlying solution by yourself. And last but not least, that's also an advantage for customer projects running in the cloud, because every custom code which is implemented and running on BTP is completely stable and decoupled by default, because you're working on a separate platform and the actual application code is running on a separate platform compared to your backend, which you have on-premise. This means you need to establish a kind of interface to your solution or any SAP solution. With this, the core solution then stay more standard and facilitate the life cycle of the core solution, so to say. Another important aspect is the market opportunity for partners, and that was planned since we launched the product about 4 years ago. We want to make the platform capable of offering the software as a service scenario for partners to be able to build solutions, make it run in the cloud, and efficiently serve their customers. So, how does the environment look like from ecosystem perspective? Here in the middle, you can see the Business Technology Platform within ABAP environment in the red box. So this runs on the cloud, which is, as said, comparable to the traditional ABAP system consisting of application server and underlying database, and the application itself contains the actual programming model. We also did some big steps here by bringing the new programming model to life, known as ABAP RESTful Programming Model, shortly RAP. This programming model is completely optimized to handle model application in web service environment. Developing application with RAP model is more effective compared to the former programming models. Additionally, we at SAP operate the environment in SAP Cloud Platform. That means we do all the upgrades and we are responsible for operations, and you just use it for your extension. This aspect of lifecycle management, stability, and equity is achieved by the new concept of cloud optimized ABAP language. That means on one hand side, the ABAP language is focused on offering new APIs or more modern language scopes and so on. But on the other hand, there would be some restriction compared to the classical on-prem development, where you could use the full scope of ABAP language. First, only web access are allowed. Means that there is no SAP GUI access to your application. And for development purpose, you can use our ADT, the ABAP development tools in Eclipse. And you should know that with this, you can build your own custom code. Additionally, we also restricted the ABAP language. That means the Doom prose or the famous call screen and so on result in syntax error. We also publish public interfaces which you can use for further development. So if you call any other function modules or classes in your extension, then you will get errors. You should know this. And however, this kind of restriction ensures the stability for the whole lifecycle management, which is done by SAP, and you just need to focus on your own development. We then have on the left-hand side the tools from the perspective of the administrator. Sorry. So who handle the environment via BTP cockpit. So nothing new compared to the cloud services, the other cloud services we have. So you can start up the system or configure things like user management or do connectivity setups or other service to your on-prem landscape. Basically, if you work with BTP platform, you will become comfortable with all of this really quickly. Also, we have embedded, let's say, the ABAP development tool in the cloud with Git infrastructure, although we're still leveraging the classical transport mechanism, but in behind this kind of transports related to Git repositories, so that you can, for example, transport code between multiple systems in the cloud. You also have various BTP services available, like AI services or process automation or analytics. We already integrate lots of services here, and we still have a lot on our roadmap to come. And then on the right-hand side, you can see all the connectivity and integration to the existing ABAP solution, which plays a role on all extension projects, because you may need APIs to extend your program. You can integrate your on-premise landscape via SAP Cloud Connector and then make use of RFC or OData APIs. But also when it comes to cloud extension, you can use the OData or SOAP APIs. This also counts for any REST-based web services. So also non-SAP APIs, for example. So coming to the use cases, we see three main scenarios at customers and partner side, which are quite natural for such a cloud development. The first one is mainly about extending SAP cloud solution. As you might know, these cloud solutions like S/4HANA don't offer rich extensibility option up to now. They are actually limited to UR-based extensibility option like in-app extensibility framework within S/4HANA Cloud with ABAP environment. You can create more complex logic in side-by-side fashion. However, this also more to come to complete the whole picture of this extensibility option that would be presented later, let's say with our new release. So the second use case is a situation in that customer or partner having some kind of SAP legacy solution running on premise, and they are not able to adopt the newest innovation because of project's complexity or because of time reason or so. So for these kind of solutions, we offer ABAP environment in BTP, which you can adopt immediately and independent of the actual background release you have running on your on-prem system. So especially in case you need to create modern application or simply prepare for move to S/4HANA, the BTP is the right way to do that. As said, we always offer the newest standard in our BTP platform, where we push the ABAP newest innovation there. Then you can implement application based on new standards and integrate into your backend via a respective API, so that the end user of such an application doesn't recognize anymore on what release from the backend perspective she is actually working. So it is a nice scenario to be independent of the backend release. And last but not least, the scenario which is about integration, and we call that hub-like scenario. So we have many customers and partners who have applications that consume different kinds of APIs from different backends, either backends distributed across the world, or you have SAP or non-SAP backends or hyperscaler cloud services you want to connect, or any other backends. There are endless possibilities here, and this scenario enables you to create application in the cloud, and the cloud actually offers those kind of integration capabilities so that you can easily integrate all different APIs and create unified view on several processes in one application running in the ABAP environment. Also, being in the BTP makes it much easier to establish this kind of connectivity to the variety of APIs. This also can for scenarios where you want to externalize functionality. So we had it in many cases that, for example, customers want to implement application that is provided to external parties, like partners that have no access to the actual secured on-prem landscape. And with that approach, you can create an application in the cloud which is accessible easily, and you can clearly define which kind of APIs this application can consume from your on-premise landscape. It is very powerful because the complete operation of the cloud system is done by SAP, and you can integrate nicely with on-premise and cloud solution. So let's talk more about the embedded extensibility and how we reach there. So one of the prominent technology we have already released is called the in-app extensibility or key user extensibility. If you look at SAP S/4HANA cloud system, you see all the traditional SAP HANA application like finance, procurement, sales, and so on. And underneath, we have the ABAP engine on top of the HANA database. As said, there is no development and extensibility considered here. Instead, we define a so-called key user who can connect to S/4HANA system and use the in-app extensibility tools to build extension for the corresponding S4 application. And this is one example of the no-code, low-code tools for development. So the persona here doesn't need to have any development background. So all the changes happens, let's say, at UI. One example is, let's say, the field extensibility. So you can create and maintain custom fields that can be used to enhance applications and APIs. You might already try this key user extensibility and take advantage of this possibility. But the other, let's say, extensibility option we provide for you is the so-called side-by-side extensibility, and in SAP BTP ABAP environment. So this is released in late 2018, and this lets you create extension on a separate platform on BTP remotely, and you can connect with a remote API to the actual system. This scenario, if you want to do any extension, you need to use ABAP platform in BTP. S/4HANA offers some publicly visible APIs on SAP Business Hub API, which is a public website, and there you can see a list of ODatas and SOAP APIs which S/4HANA Cloud Solution offers. These APIs can be called from BTP side, and you can do your logic there and extend the S/4HANA Cloud logic via those remote APIs. That also for on-premise systems, so don't necessarily need to call the release APIs, but you can develop your own API or go via RFC to call your on-prem system. As said, in BTP, we offer wrap programming, and also the cloud optimized restricted ABAP language has been introduced. As in the cloud, the upgrades and updates are done by SAP, as I said. Within the last 4 years, we received lots of feedbacks from customers and partners mentioning which scope are still needed in addition, and we introduced them in meanwhile. So we have enlarged scopes of these release APIs, which make the scope usable for any size of the use cases. The underlying platform for this is is SAP HANA, as it is for S/4HANA as well, and to follow our own code line strategy, that is for all our one code line strategy we have for all of our products. And BTP can also use either for classical extension, so you can develop your custom code on BTP, you can connect to your core system, and with that, you extend the actual logic via respective APIs. BTP offers software as a service infrastructure, which is heavily used by our partners. For example, they develop software as an add-ons via BTP using multi-tenancy there and enable them to become a cloud service provider compared to the classical shipment of add-ons like it in on-prem world. And we even go further in this road and plan in new options which provide you more flexibility in terms of on-stack development, as we discuss in the following, let's say. So we offer a new developer options within S/4HANA Cloud. So from the new release, we provide development access to S/4HANA Cloud. Considering this yellow box here, within such an S/4HANA Cloud system, you might recognize that actually the context of these boxes look very similar to what we have seen in the BTP. Here we have, by intention, we have this because we literally bring the concept which we use in BTP ABAP environment today within our actual core application. In this case, S/4HANA Cloud, so to say. This means this new environment will be based on the same concept as the BTP. So we have here the new programming model, the RAP programming model. We have the cloud optimized ABAP language, and we have also the released objects and APIs. And in addition, and that's actually the difference to what we have available in BTP, as you are working in the system, and you do not use any remote API. So you are not remotely connected to the system anymore. You develop on stack and you develop in the system. And we allow you to access to the system via this local way, which means that in such an embedded environment, in the system itself, you will, for example, also have access to bodies, and you also have a new kind of interface, which is called the wrap facet. So basically, it's a wrapped API using the ABAP RESTful application programming model. And it is basically an API which provides you a transactional access to the underlying system. So this means, for example, create, update, and delete operation can be done in public interface. So basically, if you do an extension between such an S/4HANA Cloud ABAP environment, you can locally call those kind of APIs. Whereas, for example, in the BTP, you would have to call this API via a remote API, which is either released or which you can create yourself within the S/4HANA Cloud system. But the big advantage of this new environment, and that's also actually why we are doing this kind of exercise, is that actually all development you will be doing in such an environment will be upgrade stable as it is in the BTP as well. So if you work within boundaries of embedded steampunk environment, this ensures that your development code will remain upgrade stable for our future S/4HANA releases. And interesting is, in practice, we assume that many development will actually be based on the hybrid approach. And hybrid means, in this case, that you as a developer actually use a different environments and their strengths to implement your use case. And to give you a practical example, and we found that also during the early adopter program we did with some partners and customers, that, for example, there will be many cases where you as a customer or partner decide to implement the use case on BTP because you need, for example, integration capabilities, you need some SAP BTP services you want to integrate, but you, for example, need a specific API which is very special to your kind of use cases. And then you can go into the new ABAP environment within S/4HANA. And this kind of combination of the different environment will be used quite heavily in practice. And also the in-app extensibility will continuously play an important role because the end user will actually also be able to use the in-app extensibility based on custom extension you have developed, either in BTP or in the ABAP environment to adopt the UI. Yeah, and the rules of the game in the end will be that you as a developer have a clear separation between the code you are developing as a part of your extension and the SAP code of the underlying S/4HANA application, which at the end ensures that your code will be upgrade stable. And also, you should know that there is no modification, SAP code modification is allowed, so that is an important prerequisite, because modification, as we have seen in the classical extensibility, always mean that it becomes dangerous in terms of upgrading of the underlying application. And that's why we cannot offer the modification framework within the new stable environment of S/4HANA itself. So we have different environments for different needs and different personas, which you as a customer or partner usually have available also in terms of the skills. On the S/4HANA Cloud side, we have the key user extensibility, and we now have a developer extensibility. Of course, if it regards the S4 on-premise environment, you would have another pillar here with classical extensibility like what you already use. So that we will have the key user extensibility for smaller low-code, no-code extension of our SAP solution, which cover everything from adopting your UIs by creating APIs, developing some basic business logics within the systems. And then we have within the new developer extensibility, especially in S/4HANA Cloud, a new option to really provide developer access to such as S/4HANA Cloud system. This will be basically covering really tightly coupled extension with the complex ABAP logic. So the tightly coupled in this context means that you really require close interaction with the system. So for example, you frequently access S/4HANA objects within the system. You process a lot of data within the system from your extension and so on. And this will really then cover the other developer as persona, offering developer access via the ABAP development tool to the system, offering access to the for the partners, also to either ship physically their software to the customer tenants within the S/4HANA or to the customer S/4HANA on-premise system using the add-ons infrastructure we have here. It will be based on the catalog of release, the scope from the SAP point of view, which means mainly that we release the interfaces you can use locally to access to the underlying S/4HANA system. This provides the big advantages to you that the custom code remain upgrade stable. Then we have also the side-by-side extensibility. It still covers the more loosely coupled extension, which have quite separate logic. Let's say more decoupled logic in terms of that you just select a very specific data set from this S/4HANA system via the public APIs, or for example, you process this kind of data in BTP and then you just want to write back the results. So this would be, for example, a scenario for a decoupled extension, so to say. And this is also heavily includes the partner extension, so offering partner application via the software as a service and multi-tenant infrastructures we have in the BTP. So the BTP really focus on the decoupled extensions, which are completely independent of the application lifecycle, because the BTP is a separate platform, as you might already know. And the custom code also then runs on a separate platform, and it is completely really decoupled from the application in the end, because it's just access the application from outside via a remote API. So to complete the picture from the theoretical point of view, we also plan, as mentioned earlier, to actually also offer this kind of ABAP environment or the embedded steampunk environment within S/4HANA on-premise. This means that also in S/4HANA on-premise, you will have these concepts of release scope in terms of ABAP language and the local application APIs, which you can then use to basically create upgrade a stable extension within S/4HANA as well. Complemented by the other options we have as of today, meaning that you will still be using the BTP for respective decoupled use cases. And you will still use the key user extensibility to offer easier adoption and extension possibilities for key users, so that basically the embedded steampunk or the embedded extensibility will complete the whole picture of different stable extension option or the extensibility option we offer as a part of S/4HANA and S/4HANA Cloud, let's say. So let's have a quick summary. So basically, I think it's clear that SAP is following cloud-first strategy. So all new innovations are released to the BTP and the S/4HANA Cloud Platform first, and then later on a yearly basis to S/4HANA on-premise. The simple reason is that actually the cloud has faster and smaller release cycles. So in the cloud, you have the 3 months upgrade cycle, which are done from SAP side. In the on-premise, we release the new innovation release of S/4HANA on a yearly basis. And we have the different options available. As I already discussed, we still have classical extensibility using the development tools you have as of today in the on-prem world. Then we have the combination of in-app extensibility and the new developer extensibility, as well as the side-by-side extensibility. And as said, the use cases for side-by-side also don't change as they are today. So basically more decoupled scenarios, and we now have the embedded steampunk from the new release offering in S/4HANA Cloud. So possibly for developers to do upgrade stable extension within the system, which will then on a feature basis also be available for S/4HANA on-premise solution in future, which means then in the end we have a complete whole picture. So that's it from my side about the ABAP world. So hand over to you, Tim, to talk about the other worlds.
Okay, you should.
Thanks, Safa.
Right.
So if you guys have questions for Safa, please do type your questions in the chat. And she'll be answering those questions in the chat. Thanks. Go ahead, Tim.
Yeah, first a quick check. You can hear me and you can see my screen, right? Okay.
Yes.
So let's get right into it because I have to cover a lot of stuff. First of all, I want to give you an idea what I'm going to be talking about. Of course, I'm going to be talking about the business technology platform that also Safa just covered with the ABAP part, which is obviously the foundation for a lot of SAP applications, but also maybe for your custom developments on top of this platform. Today, we are looking in the application development part. I understand automation, integration, and a lot of other ground is covered in other sessions. So we are actually on the application development part of the business technology platform. To go a bit deeper in what does that usually cover, we first of all have a number of technologies, but we also have a number of tools. There is a lot of visual low-code and no-code experience out there, like process automation and AppGyver, for example, which we won't cover today. Especially AppGyver is also for application development. We will go into, well, what's meant here is code-first tooling. You'll see it's not always code-first tooling later on, but it's more in the direction of professional developers, as the name of the session implies. We're also not going to go into digital experience today, but we'll cover a bit of DevOps. Again, zooming in even a bit more. Parts of what we're going to look into is the application frameworks that we have. The RESTful ABAP programming model, RAP, was already covered by Safa. Also the ABAP part of the runtimes. So what I'm covering basically is, I will say a bit about ABAP as well, but it's basically about the Cloud Foundry and Kyma runtime. So all the stuff that runs either on Cloud Foundry or on Kyma. These are the technologies, the front-end technologies or client-side technologies, and the back-end technologies like the Cloud Application Programming Model, CAP. There's also services. We'll cover a bit of mobile services, but the important tool on top of what we have, the dev experience, is the Business Application Studio, and we'll see that a bit. So again, zooming in a bit more, client side is the first part that I'm going to cover, actually, as of the next slide. And then there's the back end. The back end, it's mainly going to be about Cloud Application Programming Model, or in short, CAP. And then the tool that actually handles all of them, the SAP Business Application Studio. So let's first go into the client side, the UI services. So again, this is the stuff that's up there, right, in the same picture. So The first thing is actually, you could say is a really confusing picture, but what it does say to you, if you want to create new UIs in a business technology platform with SAP software, you have all the options. At the very right end, you can actually create full-blown applications with a bit of configuration, you could say, using so-called SAP Fiori elements, which we'll get into in a second. Where you get whole floor plans, list report object pages with a lot of built-in functionality out of the box, and it's a bit of configuration via so-called annotations, and then you have an application running within minutes. If you want a bit more freedom in terms of how you want to create your individual pages or how many of the individual pages in your application should there be, but still get a lot of ground covered in terms of functionality and standards that are applied, you can use the SAP UI5 framework and technology that actually also sits under the Fiori elements. Then if you say, well, I don't want to use UI5's programming model, for example, I just want to use the controls that UI5 comes up with. There is now a new option, the so-called UI5 web components. So for those who are in the know, that run in the browser directly, like HTML, and that you can use with any framework. So UI5 in huge parts uses its own UI5 web components, but you can now also use that, of course, with other frameworks, popular frameworks, for example, React. Again, even if that's too much for you, like to have the whole UI components there with its behaviors, with the built-in functionality, and you just want to look like SAP applications, you can actually go to the left-hand side, and then you find something like fundamental library styles. So this is basically CSS that you can apply to your own controls, to your own HTML, and that looks like Fiori. So you have like the full range of things that you can do as a professional developer. And actually, in a lot of cases, you can mix and match what you have there. Now let's look a bit deeper into the different technologies for those who have not heard of them or seen them. First of all, there's Fiori elements, which we said is at the right-hand side already. So you can see there's a lot of pages and applications, actually whole full-blown applications. So very often it's not just about one page. If you have a list report with an object page, it's basically a list. And then if you want to click on one of the items in the list, you get into an object page, which you could also say is a detail of whatever entity you're looking into. And these kind of applications, that looks like a lot of work, but actually, it comes with a backend service, an OData service. If there is an appropriate OData service, you have a bit of configuration and you get all these things in a matter of a couple of minutes, and you get a lot of functionality on top of this. A prominent example, for example, if you have a list, you can bet that the list is also has an export to Excel right built into it. You don't need to program it separately, right? And so, of course, like Fiori elements is your choice if you want to be really productive. If you want to have UX consistency, that's also one prominent feature. It's whenever the UX advances in SAP and there is common new rules, then you will actually see that in the templates that they're using. And because these templates for Fiori Elements applications are not copy templates, but they're reference, once they change, your application also changes, right? And then very often that's actually what you want. If there's something changed all over the product range, you will see that also in your applications. And of course, as I said, like UI5 comes with a lot of built-in functionalities and standards, which we also call enterprise readiness. And you don't need to care about things that you really don't want to care about. You want to actually, when you create your application, want to mostly care about the business logic, and that's what you want to focus on. Then Fiori Elements with its standard floor plans and its standard functionality is the best choice for you, right? What I mentioned before, but Fiori Elements covers a lot of ground, but not all ground. So you might actually want to have a bit more flexibility sometimes, or there is just applications, new innovations that you have that, for example, are not covered by floor plans from Fiori Elements and the different pages it has. So you can then use UI5 as mentioned before, UI5 is basically, comes with controls, UI elements, you could say, but also with a framework. So you can create the whole UI application using UI5 and again, get a lot of enterprise qualities. There are a lot of functionalities. There is 10 plus years already of development on SAP side in this technology. So you can imagine there's a lot of great stuff, a lot of improvements in all kinds of ways. And one of the improvements I mentioned is like the UI5 web components. For those who don't know what web components are, this is standard HTML that you have in the browser. And there's in the last couple of years, an emerging standard is web components that technologies like UI5 can register their controls as normal HTML tags. In this case, you see there is a UI5 button, for example, a UI5 input, and so on. So these are actually, just put into normal HTML documents as the standard HTML tags, but they come with obviously a lot of stuff behind the scenes. And all the great things that UI5 can do. For example, value helps and so on and so on. So you can now use these UI5 web components directly in your HTML documents, and you don't then have to use, if you don't like that, the UI5 framework to benefit from the controls here. Okay, next great innovation that came up, UI5 was for a long time just JavaScript. So if you wanted to develop, use the framework, apart from HTML and CSS, of course. If you wanted to use the framework, it was basically JavaScript development. JavaScript is still around, and of course you can use it, but now you can also use TypeScript, right? And this support is in the Business Application Studio, which we will cover later as well. So you can use the editors of the Business Application Studio or in Visual Studio to get the TypeScript support. That's new. And something, another step of flexibility. So far I talked about the Fiori Elements framework, which gives you full-blown pages and floor plans, and then UI5, which is more on control level. What if you want to have something in between? Let's say what I just mentioned, you want to have a list, right, which comes in. So you get a UI5 list, yes, but you don't immediately from UI5 get an Excel download, for example, that you get from Fiori Elements. So what if you don't want to have a whole page by Fiori Elements, but you want to have a list which with enhanced functionality like the Excel download? You can then use the so-called flexible programming model that you see here, and that's also advancing really in a fast manner. So you can use whole blocks of what you have in Fiori Elements without having to take the whole page as it was delivered so far. So it's not only an option to have a list report and an object page anymore, but you can actually create several pages with blocks like lists, like filter bars, and so on, without going down to the UI5 freestyle way completely. So it's yet another option of flexibility. Then actually, let's also look at the mobile side. There is the mobile development kit, which I really, for time reasons, only can cover in a small manner. The mobile development kit not only comes with controls, but also comes with stuff that you really need for your mobile development. For example, it has offline support for your applications. It also comes with a so-called mobile client, where you can actually, which you can get natively for Android and iOS on the respective stores. It also, like Fiori Elements that I have probably not mentioned before, can use OData services. Fiori Elements is always based on OData services. In mobile development kit, that's an option. So you can use CAP services, for example, which we'll talk about in a second. And it's just a great technology to create mobile solutions, right? I mentioned the mobile client, right, which is available in the different stores and gives you these offline and online capabilities. So you can get a real good experience, mobile experience for your mobile applications without just having to use plain HTML5 applications, but all the stuff on top of it, right? So let's go to the backend now that we covered like the clients. It's there, apart from, if you're not an ABAP, where the ABAP RESTful programming model, RAP, in embedded steampunk, as Safa showed you, is the main programming model. We have the cloud application programming model, or in short CAP, on, you could say, the rest of BTP. That's basically development in Java or JavaScript here. So CAP supports both, but you'll see in a second, they have like a common foundation, which are the core data services, or called CDS. That's the way how you model your data models and your services. And again, to get the bigger picture, where are we now in this whole, you could say, a choice of technologies? We are on the backend side here, and that's what we are looking into. So the cloud application programming model, as it says here, is apart from, it's in the non-ABAP hemisphere, as you call it, the most adopted framework. Just as a side note, if you're running on BTP and you want to create your application without using all these technologies, these really good technologies that I'm telling you, right? You want to do your plain Java using Spring or JavaScript, just without these, of course, that's also an option. And you know, also I'm mentioning Java and JavaScript. There's also, you know, all other kinds of languages can be run, but I'm just focusing on, let's say, the goodies on top of what you get of this plain stuff, because it saves you a lot of time, and that's also, and gives you another level of quality. And that's also what we see with the with CAP here, right? So there's a lot of interest in it and a lot of downloads for it. Let's have a look into a bit more details. So what CAP focuses on is basically the definition of data and services using CDS. It will then, similar to RAP, actually serve APIs as OData v4 or v2. These APIs can be used either for UIs or for other services, right? The services that you create using a CAP via CDS can also consume services from other resources. So you can have a mashup, for example. So you can import from the SAP API Hub. You can import directly from destinations that you have in your BTP account for S/4HANA, SuccessFactors, and so on. So you can make use of a lot of APIs that come from backend systems, and we'll also talk about that later still a bit. Then there is a platform database support. One important new thing for those who know CAP already, so far there was only a deployment to our Cloud Foundry runtime. Now, since 2 months or so, you can also deploy to Kuma. So your CAP application would run on Cloud Foundry and on Kuma in the same way. You just have to do a different deployment. When it comes to supported database, that's a question that always comes up. It's at the moment, it's mainly HANA. So if you're running locally, it's SQLite. That's something that's spinned up by the development server. So you get a nice developer turnaround. But if you deploy, it runs on HANA. Postgres is in the making though, right? But of course, with HANA, you get a lot of additional features, especially with respect to analytics on top of what you get in Postgres. But Postgres is in the making. So just for those who have not seen CDS or the CAP CDS, here's an example. So on the left-hand side, you see how a data model is created. Here we have a capital expenditure example with a key and a couple of properties, also associations to business partner, which is imported from S4, but also to a new model category here. And then on top, you build a service layer, and the service layer is a projection, either one by one, or in the case of the business partner, just picking out some of the properties of the original business partner that has a lot of entities and that has a lot of properties here. So that's the way how you really quickly define your models. you don't say how they behave. That's taken care of by the CAP framework for you. You just define what you want to have, like the entities and the services, right? Okay, so again, a couple of things about CAP. What are the good things about it? It really gives you a fast turnaround, right? And it's also really good in terms of testing, right? You don't have to deploy a CAP application when you test it. You can always run it locally, either in the Business Application Studio, or if you're using other IDEs like Visual Code, you can run it on your machine. So within seconds of a change, you can actually see the result and test it. Also, CAP comes with this grow as you go concept, which means you actually care about things like deployment, for example, and the deployment files and configurations that you need for the CAP application when it's time to do so, right? If you just want to build a hello world and you don't even want to deploy something, you don't have to take care of deployment files before that. You add these capabilities when it comes to the point that you want to deploy, right? Okay. As it, it also gives you a lot of best practices. It saves you a lot of code, especially compared to, doing freestyle stuff, as I said, just going down to the plain languages or other frameworks. With CAP, again, in a couple, really in a couple of minutes, you have a full-blown OData service without writing any code, just by CDS definitions. Okay, now let's go into the tool. The standard tool, the Business Application Studio, right? So again, we're on the left-hand side covering it all. It covers it all really in multiple ways. Either some of these technologies are covered by specific extensions, specific tools inside there, very often about visual tooling, visual ways. But at the very least, there is a text-based editor which comes in with usual stuff which you hope from IDEs, code completion and that kind of stuff. But very often, if it's SAP standard technologies from BTP, we come with a visual layer. And so what does the, really quickly also, what BTP, what BAS, the abbreviation of the Business Application Studio, what BAS is, how it differentiates from other IDEs is it has it's kind of a turnkey solution, right? So you say, okay, I want to create a full stack application. So I have a CAP backend, I will have a UI5 Fiori Elements or MDK backend. Then you can just click one configuration and it will actually give you all the extensions that are needed for it and kind of a glue that makes it easier for bringing all these technologies together. And let's have a look at that. That's our newest stuff. That's around about a year or so. And we are heavily developing on this. You can build great full stack applications with, again, I'm talking about a matter of minutes. If you know what you're doing here, you will be able to create a whole application from creating the data model, creating the services on top of it, maybe providing sample data, and creating the user interfaces like Fiori Elements and the mobile development kit, really in a matter of under 10 minutes. And then you have a first version, which you can preview. Preview means it's not deployed, it all runs locally, but also the deployment that finally comes about for those who have worked with BTP before. For deployment, you have to do a lot of configurations. Now we've enabled this with a one-click deployment. So you press the button, and once you press the button, yes, code generated in the back for the deployment. Anyway, that was a point, like I just said, generation of code. That's something that happens behind the scenes for all of this, right? This is important, and we get to the next stage here. Excuse me. While we have visual editors for everything that you just saw on the slide before, for example, the data model, you create that in a visual way. What happens behind the scenes is that we create, in this case, a CDS model, right? And the CDS model is created in the very same way as if you would have written it down manually, right? So, and you get access to this. You can actually at any point decide, well, if I come from this, the slide before, if I come from this visual tooling, all over the place, true no code, you would actually say, to get the scenario running that you show here, that I show here. You can actually switch at any time to the generated code and work on from here. Yeah, not always the way back works. With CDS, it does. If it's JavaScript, I think most of you, it's clear. For most of you, it's clear. It doesn't. You can't just tamper with any JavaScript and then think the visual tools know what the change is. But this direction to switch at any point from what you've done visually to the code always works, and there is zero additional metadata. It's important, right? We basically generate what you would write down manually. The generation also now goes, that's for those who already know, this is a newer part. We also generate stubs for CAP application logic parts, right? So you can write your own application logic. At the moment, this is still plain Java or JavaScript. But what will happen here is pretty soon, we are already working on this, it's a future enhancement, is we'll also have something what we'll call visual flow logic, which is a bit like code, but it helps you a lot to create that code without knowing the syntax and without knowing, without having to know basically what you want to do and just get a bit of help of code completion. Here, you could say it's much easier to create application logic for you, but that's a future outlook. Let's also look into this option. We talked about UI technologies, Fiori elements mainly, and MDK apps. In the case of the productivity tools, visual productivity tools that you've just seen, you get two choices. Let's say you've just created your CAP service, and then on this CAP service, you want to create a Fiori Elements application or an MDK application, right? MDK, you would say, is more mobile-based. It's responsive, but is optimized on mobile, but also the desktop. Fiori Elements, you could say, is the other way around. It's more desktop optimized, but it also is responsive and works also on mobile. But you get these choices, what's better for you in an optimized way. For Fiori Elements, for those who've used it, normally you would have to write a lot of annotations, or you have to write some annotations. That's the configuration of Fiori Elements that I talked about at the beginning of the talk. Meanwhile, you have also visual tooling here. You have like options to set the annotation, so you don't even know that annotations are created, and you have to write zero code to it. For example, very important to create a value help on top of your, or value helps on top of your UI. Then we have the so-called service center. Service center in the Business Application Studio is the part where you connect to backends, like as for example, you discover services, like in this case, the sales order that you see here. You can actually explore it a bit, whether that's a service that you like, and then you can take it over into your project and use it in your project. And there's immediately, depending on what kind of solution you're using to connect to the backend, there is immediately connectivity for you to make that happen. And to work it as the BAS platform, and that's a recent change. It was always based on kind of the spirit of visual code, you could say. Before, until recently, it was based on an open source project called Thea, which kind of, you could say, mimicked visual code. Now, and the release will be happening really soon, I think next week. It's going to be based on the Microsoft original MS Code OSS client. So it is visual code, really. So it's based on visual code, but that also means your own extensions. You can write your own editors here. They run in visual code and they run also in BAS, right? And that's also true for a lot of SAP extensions that have been written as visual code extensions. They run in both worlds, right? But remember, the Business Application Studio, that comes as a turnkey solution. As I said, that's one big differentiator. You have the editors, and they're kind of what we've shown before in the slides before, kind of glued together, and it makes sure that it all works together in a nice way. So it's not just, it's more than the sum of the individual editors that you get with the Business Application Studio. DevOps, I still only have 2 minutes, but I should be fine. DevOps, you can see this picture. You have, like, on the BTP, And because BTP is like an open platform, you can use so many technologies and put them together and do something with it. And then the same goes obviously for DevOps. How do you do DevOps and this possible zoo of things, right? Like, and what do you pick and choose to make it happen? Again, just to streamline the process for you and to have like you would say 90% use case rather than you having to create pipelines from scratch with all the possibilities there are. SAP now also gives you an easy start with the continuous integration and delivery service. That's not to say that SAP does not give you the option anymore to create your own pipelines. There is the so-called Project Piper that's out there where you can do that freely, and SAP helps you to create your own pipelines as you like. But with continuous integration and delivery with the service, you get a couple of, you get what it says here, the golden path, right? And it helps you with a number of limited configurations. You don't have all the options, but it just gets you much faster to what you want to do. With the continuous integration delivery service, you can not only do CI/CD as it says, but you can also optionally put the so-called cloud transport management that you also get on top of it behind it. And then you get, like, if you have something like a landscape like dev, test, and production, with the cloud transport management, you can actually control when does which delivery go to which platform, right? Also putting humans in there and approval processes. And that's an additional choice that you have on top of the continuous integration and delivery, which normally from the Business Application Studio is, can be configured that if there's a change in Git, then it starts, and you can see it here. Really last point for another 30 seconds, maybe. Something that Safar has already touched upon, but I want to highlight this there. There is a lot of options for you to use what Safar has said as the embedded steampunk, or the long name SAP S/4HANA Cloud ABAP environment, using all the goodies that come with this. For example, being able to create your own services via RAP, and using public interfaces which are not remote to start off with from S/4HANA, and having this huge wealth of functionality there, creating your own services. But at the same time, you can use create the services here, but then use the Business Application Studio or AppGyver, which obviously is more for the citizen developers at the moment. We haven't covered this today. Create your own custom UI experiences, applications that could be mobile as well, and either deploy them to BTP, or in the case of BAS, you can deploy them even back to Steampunk. So you're using both together. You're using the BTP and you're using embedded Steampunk. And it's a very likely scenario to happen, because a lot of the S4 services, there are 700 of them, they are not meant for UI and are not optimized for UI consumption. So if you want to create a custom experience, it's very likely that you will have to create a new custom UI service, an optimized service, and then build an application, for example, with Fiori Elements or UI5 on top. And that finally concludes what I had to say. And I'm sorry that I rushed through this so much.
Okay, thank you so much, Tim. As you all can see, there's so much material that we can't really cover to do it justice in the 60 minutes that we have. If you have any questions for Tim, please do type your questions. We may not get to the questions now, but just keep typing your questions in the chat, and we'll gather all of the questions, and Tim and Safa will respond to those questions, and then we'll upload them in the hub that we will put all the material. I put the link where you can find the material. If you come back to this YouTube link, you should be able to get the video as well, that of the recording, and the link that I included in the chat should contain not only today's material, but all the material that we've done in the past. And with that, thank you again to our presenters for taking time out of your busy schedules to join us. Thank you all for joining us as well, taking time out of your busy schedules to join us. As they say, same time, same place next week, we will have episode 9, data warehousing. And with that, have a great morning, afternoon, or evening, wherever you're located. Thank you so much.